Hello, my name is Pedro Stinson and I'm the Senior Project Manager for U.S. Sugar Corporation. In this session, I'll be going over some insights into U.S. Sugar's warehouse management strategy. I'll begin with a brief overview of who we are here at U.S. Sugar. I'll touch on our approach to some of our user experience and mobilization, and then I'll roll into our most recent warehouse operations streamlining and improvements project and wrap up with some of possible future mobility projects. Since 1931, U.S. Sugar has been growing sugarcane, citrus, sweet corn, and other vegetables. As you can see, each year our farms and fields produce around 10% of the sugar produced in the United States. We here at U.S. Sugar have been innovative from the start. We use our 270 square mile privately owned Wi-Fi network to connect nearly all of our farms, fields, equipment, and personnel together. We use state-of-the-art GPS tracking for precise farming practices as well as automated steering to ensure maximum yields. With over 2,500 employees during our peak season, we're one of the largest agricultural corporations in Florida. Faithful to its tradition of innovator, one of U.S. Sugar's goals is to modernize its operations and processes with cutting-edge technologies to reduce operating expenses. Manual, paper-based processes throughout the company are prone to inaccurate data and unnecessary delays. We are constantly working towards the next set of improvements we can make to replace our older processes with newer, faster, and more accurate ones. As we look at improving our user experience and mobilization strategies, we took a look at why we felt a solid user experience was important to us. From the financial side, a solid user experience will help increase productivity, reduce training costs, and strengthen data accuracy. From the employee side, we see an increase in user satisfaction and engagement, a decrease in resistance to change, and an overall strengthening of our IT and business department relationships. When trying to identify the best SAP user interface for our users, we needed to look at the different categories of users we employ here at U.S. Sugar. And in doing so, we determined we could break it down, our SAP users down into three major categories based off of frequency and depth, which we would then use to determine the UI type we wanted to provide to them. So on one end, we have our kind of power user, expert users, where SAP is the primary application used on a daily basis with several transactions used extensively and with a high volume of data. We feel these users are best suited for a solid, robust desktop application. We then have a more basic user which uses SAP often and mostly just to accomplish specific tasks with a somewhat limited number of transactions and basic functionalities. These users would benefit more from a mix of desktop and mobile application, kind of wherever felt necessary. And then on the other side, we have the occasional users where SAP is used rarely, mostly just for approvals and reporting with only a few transactions at a time, and a low volume of data at that point. So we would rely most of these users on a more web or mobile application. So while working with our business units, it was determined that some streamlining and optimizations in the U.S. Sugar warehouse process was needed. The U.S. Sugar warehouse process put in a process in place to kit parts for certain work orders in order to make it faster for distributing these parts to people when they needed to pick them up. The process was put in place was effective but highly manual and required the work orders to be printed, passed from person to person, and required data to be manually entered into SAP at the end. Also, tracking the location of these kit boxes containing these parts needed for each worker for each work order was handled outside of the system and was a real pain point for the warehouse management. So U.S. Sugar partnered with Nimble and identified Neptune as a solution to replace existing warehouse management software, add functionality to streamline the kitting process, and at the same time create an improved user experience. The Neptune platform was selected primarily for its device browser capability, barcode reader integration, offline capabilities, and alignment with SAP mobile strategy and drag and drop rapid development. Some of the Neptune Architecture features we wanted to take advantage of was that it is installed as an SAP ABAP add-on and its integration with ERP, SRM, SCM, MM, and others. And they could easily run on an iOS, Android mobile application, or desktop application. So as you can see, the Neptune Launchpad and the client have a very SAP Fiori-like feel, as well as a mobile-friendly development and deployment process. And now we'll discuss a little of the kitting application that we built with Nimble on the Neptune application. Here you'll see the main Neptune Launchpad screen, where the users will see only the tiles or applications that they're permissioned for. So some of the key Neptune features we took advantage of was the ability to run on iOS and Android and support offline mode, because some of the areas within the warehouse have lesser or lower connectivity, as well as the integrated barcode reader functionality. Here we'll focus on the kitting process itself, which begins with the user clicking on the main kitting title. The kitting process is broken down to 3 different sub-processes. Kitting, which is used to pick items from the work order and placed in a container to be delivered or picked up by the different users or departments that request those items. The validation process is used to visually validate all the items within the kitted work order, just to make sure that they're all in the box and ready for the end user. And then we have the kit box return, which is a process used by the warehouse team after receiving the kit box back from the department, prior to putting the kit box back into inventory to be used for future work orders. So the next process is we'll kick off actually with the kitting sub-process. So the user will be prompted to select the work order. Work orders can be selected from the available drop-down, or they can be typed in an inline search. The application will automatically filter out and only display work orders in the correct work order status for the kitting process. The main screen actually shows all the items within the work order that are ready to be kitted or picked and placed in the kit box. The screen shows the material number, the current warehouse storage location, the item description, the number of items required for the kit, and the number of items already withdrawn for this work order. Once the user is physically in front of the specific item in the warehouse, the user will select the item on that screen, which will then direct them to the item details page. The items details page will allow the user to enter the number of items being pulled from inventory and placed into the kitting box. The user can also enter the location where the kit box will be stored if they know where it's going to go, where its final location will be. All this information is sent directly to SAP at every step to ensure that we have an increased or an accurate inventory count, better said. As the items get kitted and saved, the main list actually counts down to 0 to allow for an easier user experience, as some of these work orders can have several, even hundreds of items in them. And during the kitting process, usually at the end, but can happen really at any time, the user will assign a specific kit box to that work order to be used for tracking of the work order as a whole. The kitting sub-process will be completed for that work order once all the items have been picked and the box has been assigned, and that kit box is actually charged to the department, so that when it gets returned, and you'll see that in one of the later processes, when they get returned, that charge actually gets reimbursed back to the department. The application at the end, once all items have been kitted, will make a call to SAP, the final call to SAP, and it'll update the internal status of that work order to ready to validate. So that kind of brings us to the second of the 3 sub-processes, which is the kit validation. Prior to any kit being released to end users, the warehouse team will perform a visual inspection on that kit box just to make 100% sure that all items within that work order are in that box. The beginning of the process is very similar to the kitting process. They click on the validation tile, and they are presented with a list of the available work orders to select, Similar to the other process, they can either select it, type it in, or whatnot. Once that work order is selected, they'll see a list of all the items that have been kitted from that work order and their counts. At that point, the user will have the ability to either validate the entire work order all at once, if it's a small number of items and they can see all of them in that one box, or it allows them to go in and individually select each item in that work order, do the visual verification, submit it for validation, and then it'll also basically count down to 0, similar to the kitting process itself. Both of these countdown to zeros were requested during the initial kind of discussion phases with the business to allow for a much easier user experience. As I said before, some of these work orders can have several, if not hundreds, of items in them. If the user actually does select the actual individual item, it gives them the ability to verify the kit location. They can change the kit location if needed, and validate any individual items in the kit box as needed. As individual items are validated, like I said before, they'll get removed from the screen, in essence counting down to 0. And at the end of this process, SAP or a call to SAP will be made again, setting the work order status as ready for delivery, indicating to the users that that box has been not only kitted but also verified and is ready for pickup or delivery based off of the needs of the end department. From here, the process to notify the users that the kit was ready for delivery or whatnot, that wasn't really in the scope of the mobile app, so we kind of left it at that. As the different departments actually receive their work order kits, they receive those kit boxes. And as I said before, they were charged the cost for those kit boxes. So this is done in an effort to make sure that the warehouse department would actually get their kit boxes back. So as the kit boxes are returned to the warehouse, a process was needed to actually put those kit boxes back into warehouse inventory and return the charge for that kit box to that department. Therefore giving the individual or the different departments an incentive to return their boxes in a good kit box working order. So this third sub-process was created, which was called the kit box return, specifically for that process. So as kit boxes were returned to the warehouse, the user would select kit box return sub-process, scan the kit box material number and box number, would then do a search on, the application would do a search on SAP for a kit box material number and box number that matched with that work order. It would show up the work order. If the kit box was in good usable condition, the user would then allow that kit box to be returned. That kit box would be returned back into the inventory, and the charge for that kit box would be reimbursed to that department. So that was a pretty high-level review of what our kind of mobile kitting application that we created. Trust me, there was a lot more going on than what I had really time to show you. In addition to the kitting process, we actually also replaced the existing warehouse management software that was used for cycle counting. This allowed us to reduce our expenses by eliminating the annual maintenance for the legacy software, as well as we used the similar technologies to help improve accuracy, help improve speed, and usability for the users. So, as I'm sure everyone has felt, this COVID-19 impacted us as well. Luckily, we had actually just rolled out this new process, allowing the warehouse to minimize the impact of the social distancing guidelines by allowing the warehouse managers to work remotely, eliminating the passing of physical paper from person to person throughout this process, and reduce the time spent on shared computer stations. So some of our kind of future mobility projects include some additional partnerships with Neptune and Nimble to implement 2 new mobile apps, the work order management and the water tracking apps. The work order management application will be used to create work orders from maintenance notifications and upgrade progress and close work orders as they're being completed. And the water tracking app will be a custom application built to replace our current paper-based process that's currently used for tracking when we start and stop pumps for irrigation out in the fields. And that's it for the presentation. Thank you very much for your time.